let's just jump right into it actually. So Ishan, that's how you pronounce your name, right? If I'm not getting it wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
That's the way.
Um, so I came across your content on Facebook around a year and a half ago. I'm not really sure if you remember whether we've been Facebook friends for that long. But Facebook memories always reminds me of that because there's been some amount of interaction, whether it's been through Facebook comments or posts and shares and whatsoever. And I remember just kind of like having a little bit of a tour on your LinkedIn profile. I also sort of like, scrolled through your profile on Facebook too, because you're a content creator and like there's a dynamic approach that you do take when it comes to content creation. And that's when I found out that you actually pursued your studies in the ecological space. Tell me a bit about that. How did that choice come to be?
Well, like all good like Mauritian students, I guess, I completed the studies, like the basic studies path that was laid out in like high school. I did more the technical field, so physics and computer, math, and of course French as sub, and GP as sub as well. I say of course, as if it's like it's not normal, but at the time it sort of was forced in a way,
It still
implicitly.
is, by the way.
And yeah, so you would know, you're more like how do you call it, in touch with the education system than I am. But yeah, and yeah, so when I finished my HSC, I got my results and stuff. Like then my parents basically told me that okay, so now we're gonna send you overseas. What do you want to study? I was privileged that way. I always say it's a privilege. It's not luck. It's not nothing. It's a real privilege to be able to go overseas and study. So I was like, fair enough. I was watching a lot of like adventure movies at the time, and of course, brown parenting. It was like become a professional. I was like, what is this? I was really sort of socially awkward, and so I was like, I just got a pamphlet from universities and stuff. I knew I wanted to go to Melbourne or Australia. And so I reviewed it and I found like, okay, they want me to do engineering. Like they're guiding, they're nudging me towards doing engineering. Like fair enough, I looked at all the engineering courses like civil, chemical, mechanical, all of those like very hard STEM fields, I would say. And I was always more of a like artsy, like dreamer kind of vibe to me. So then I found like environmental engineering. So that's what my qualification. So when I found this, I read the course content. I was like, it was about in 2008, I think, 2008, 2009. I was like, whoa, this looks really good because it's like everything like sort of it's making the world a better place, right? Now it seems a little bit self-evident, like a self-evident field to go into, because everyone sort of wants to contribute to making the world a better place, in that it's in sort of a chaos right now on the ecological front. So I guess it was a very selfish decision for, in my mind, to be able to contribute to the collective good. Um, it's sort of a contradiction in a way, but yeah, I'm filled with contradiction that way. And yeah, and then after that, when I went to Australia and stuff, it was adapting. It was realizing that I still had to do a lot of math because it's still an engineering course.
It
And
is, yeah.
yeah, so funny anecdote. I actually didn't bring a calculator with me when I went to when I moved. I was like, one of my friends was like, "No, you're gonna need your calculator with you." Like, I don't finish with calculating. I'm good.
Good
And
riddance. Yeah.
yeah, and it wasn't good riddance at all. Like I had to buy one with my limited student budget first semester. But yeah, then I went there, and it was very environmental engineering at the time. It was very much something which was developing. Like it was still finding its marks. Like myself, the course I did was more like a mixture of civil engineering, chemical engineering, environmental policy, environmental sciences as well, policy management, economic side of things, etc., etc. It was a very pluridisciplinary sort of course structure. So I had to make you become more of a generalist because they didn't really know where to put environmental engineers at the time. And then yeah. And but on your comment about content creation and stuff, and it was sort of an outlet for me. You mentioned a year and a half ago. Yeah, that was about the time I started like making memes in a way, because before I was sharing them. And funny anecdote, it was actually two events which really made me sort of like get out, start to express myself in this way, I guess. Like, um, it was first when I heard the Greta Thunberg speech of "How dare you"
Yeah.
in New York. I was very aghast with that. We can talk about it after, but I had to like sort of have some form of catharsis, so I did that. That was one, and then after it was after the Wakashio incident actually. So you will sort of notice a trend if you go like on my profile, I guess. You will see that I really started memeing pretty hard when the Wakashio incident happened because I felt even the COVID didn't really affect me that much, but that was sort of a big hit in the face, I guess. And it was just my way to cope. And then things just snowballed from that. Yeah.
It's just like when you were talking, I was just taking notes because you mentioned a couple of really interesting things. And I probably want to start with the choice of going into environmental engineering in 2008. Did you see that as a brave choice? And the reason why I'm asking the question is because, as far as I can gather, with regards to how students choose the career and the fields of study, there's this tendency of going for the more lucrative sides of tertiary education, probably. And perhaps within the Mauritian context, going for an environmental engineering course is not seen or perceived, at least by the broad majority, as being extremely financially stable for that matter. Were those considerations that you were really, assessing, or was it more a matter of I'm having an outlet to express myself a bit more creatively within an environment like an engineering course, then why not? Sort of like getting the best world of your parents and your own personality.
I was a very sheltered kid when I grew up. Like we live pretty upper middle class upbringing. So relatively privileged, not as privileged as some in Mauritius at the time. But so my dad basically had a textile factory, and he's a very good dad in this. Well, he sort of sheltered us from like the hard realities of life in a way. Um, I thank my mom for that because she really did like raise us to have this sort of holistic view of things. But at the time, like when actually decided my field of study, it was more idealistic. It was more like I'm actually going to go and become Indiana Jones. I actually saw that there was geology. I was like, I'm going to learn about like going forest, like and actually live in the nature. A bit like Katy Perry when she goes into like Eye of the Tiger. How do you call it? The song, Raw. Yeah, it was a bit of that in my mind.
Right.
Very childish view of life where like I would always be financially secure no matter what. And it was definitely a big reality check. And yeah, I still carry it with me to this day. And just like I actually talk to, because I know the audience who's going to view this is a bit younger as well, who might be stuck in this sort of situation where they actually fell down the social ladder because their family lost their jobs or the COVID recession, etc. If I can use this opportunity to just tell to people like, yeah, maybe it's gonna be tough for like 1 or 2 years, but it's how you pick yourself up after.
Yeah, I guess like the essential word perhaps to put to that is that attitude of resilience. That of course is something that we don't necessarily identify when we're much, much younger. And to bounce off what you mentioned about the sense of idealism, right? I guess they say that idealism comes with the younger ages. And that's where it really piques my curiosity. Apart from your home environment, did you feel that your school environment, your educational background had something to do to nurture that sense of wonder, that sense of idealism, that sense of wanting to give back. Um, what was it like? Did you feel that that kind of, eco consciousness or that sort of like wanting to save the world was something that was present in your peers at the time?
Mm, so there's I went to Saint Mary's and then I switched to Saint Esprit after. Um, so in lower and upper. But I vividly remember that when I was in there wasn't really much talk about like environmentalism at the time. It was more general like social issues like that's it. The ecological consciousness wasn't as developed as it is today. But what I do remember, and this is why I actually think that supranational bodies like the UN do have their place, even though there are some issues, was that uh, there was when I was in Saint Esprit, I think it was in lower six. There was a I was chosen by the GP teacher to represent Saint Esprit in like in a sort of a like how do you call this presentation, like student engagement in certain societal issues about the Montreal Protocol. The Montreal Protocol, it was basically, for those who don't know, it's about like the hole in the ozone layer and banning the substances which actually creates the hole in the ozone layer. So I actually had to do research. At the time, there was no internet as it is today.
Yeah,
so, so
2008,
yeah,
2009 was like a really boom in the internet in Mauritius.
yeah,
That's when it
yeah.
started.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. But at the time, like for this, it was like 2000, 2006 or something. But yeah, yeah,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah, it's true. And yeah, but yeah, so I've actually did the presentation. There was also two other teammates. Um, and this was really the start of. It's good that you're making me remind me of that because that was actually the start of me like understanding that we do live in a global environment and that there are things that can be done and should be done to preserve sort of this capital we have, the natural capital we have at our disposition, and how wise are we as caretakers of those resources. So yeah, and of course, like I don't know if you recall, but on TV, like the cartoons we used to have when we were kids, there was there was the show which was it was a French show, L'Histoire du Monde or something
Oh
like that.
yes, I know about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that definitely as well was like sort of something which actually captured my imagination with thinking large scale and reading books. Read quite a lot of books. I was more into fiction, Christopher Pike. Christopher Pike actually really helped me. At the time, it was like everyone sort of read Christopher Pike. It was sort of the Harry Potter of like
Of
not
those times. Yeah, I remember that.
yeah
I was
yeah
part of that
yeah.
gang too.
There's only one Pike book I haven't read. I'm keeping it like up there actually. Road to Nowhere, and yeah. So it's just like all of those experiences because Pike really talks a lot about space exploration, like self, like how to actually build your self character and how to find yourself in like the world in alien environments and stuff. So this culmination of events sort of like formed my sort of view of the world. And I'm also a musician. Like I actually played in bands with like adults when I was a kid. Well, I actually played in a band with one of the teachers in Saint Esprit when I went there.
Oh wow.
So two teachers actually. So yeah, I'm a pretty decent bass player. Sorry. So yeah, so the sort of like extracurricular activities, they they really merge with my like sort of academic side.
I guess it, as you said, like this is definitely for a much younger viewership, and it's very interesting that you're kind of like self reflecting on your younger self to kind of like give context as well. There are tangents that you touched up in that I wasn't aware of when I was preparing for this, and especially in terms of like just that kind of advice of thinking ahead and being resilient no matter what happens in a particular social context or situation. You don't really know. You're planning for your career. You don't really know what's going to happen in a couple of years. Economic downturns, making the choices with regard to your field. So I think that's really really enriching. Um, to really add on to how you said that a couple of events really marked you growing up. And before you also mentioned how the Wakashio incident uh, is also a huge event, a very recent one that was something that marked you again.
When so the bulk carrier came, like the crash, the MV Wakashio, it crashed on like the coral reefs. We still don't really know how this happened, and I was following it like a very like at a distance in a way. I was like, okay, cool. Like, there's some risk, hazards, etc. But we trust the authorities, right? And then, like, when the oil spill, then the oil started spilling, right? And we were all like, dude, what do we do? Like, what's gonna happen? The first thing I did was actually like, I was in the office at the time. I was like, well, I'm just gonna take this, and I posted it on LinkedIn. It actually was my the post I got the most liked, uh, most shares and likes and views, etc. But then after this, it was like I actually had really bad sinusitis, like so I couldn't go and help in actually structuring the we actually the Mauritian the chain of solidarity. So to come back to that, which was created in the COVID, it was it was thanks to this that uh, the citizen response, the civic response, actually happened. So
Right,
when this chain, so in a way we can say thanks for the first lockdown to having created that, so that it was primed for it to be
right,
helpful when this situation happened. That's the whole thing with the Wakashio thing. It's like it was just my inability to actually go and help because of certain circumstances I was in. It was also seen that Mauritians would actually put their heads together. This is why I sort of came back to Mauritius, because I sort of knew it innately in myself. Like, part of the reason I came back, maybe like so we're gonna like do this. Um, Part of the reason why I came back was because after having done like all of my studies and etc. etc. I was sort of in a precarious situation financially because I had to sustain myself. So I had this choice, right? I had enough money to either pay for my PR process, so permanent residency process in Australia, or say book a ticket and come back to Mauritius. So I was just like, dude, like I'm living in a house with backpackers. I'm like I have good friends here and there, but I don't have family. And on top of that, so that was on the personal side. On the professional side, I was like, even if I become like, let's say, a chartered environmental engineer, like I actually work on environmental projects or social projects, sustainability projects in Australia, it's still not my country, right? It's sort of weird way. It's not like where I grew up. Like, do I really want to participate in making? I would not feel like legitimate in a way for me. Yeah, just my personal values to actually tell Australian borns how to treat their heritage in a way. So
cool. Like there's a lot that I just took away from your discourse right now, and specifically, it never dawned upon me how the energy and the synergy that was getting cultivated online with regards to the COVID-19 situation in Mauritius was something that almost relayed into the Wakashio management. And that's something that you actually kind of like connected those dots for me today. Because obviously I wasn't in Mauritius, so I wasn't quite aware who was connecting whom to what group. But I can definitely see that. And yeah, you're totally right in saying that there's been a digital boom in Mauritius after and during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially because a lot of services started going online. People were sort of almost forced to do digital transactions, which Mauritians were very reluctant to kind of indulge in before. So that was like definitely very insightful to understand that. And I actually want to contribute a bit to your point with regards to how you being unable to contribute and being sur le terrain for the Wakashio, crisis management, you started creating content around it. And that's what brings me to the terminology and understanding of digital activism, which is very looked down upon for some reason. That, oh, why are you being an armchair activist? Why are you being a keyboard warrior? Or why are you just creating content? But very recently, I read a couple of research papers in academia giving a lot of power to digital activism. Probably the fact that you were making all those memes, and I know this for a fact. The amount of sharing chain that went by from your memes could have empowered people, could have gotten people to take some kind of action that was possible at their level. So even if you were not necessarily there physically, the fact that you were able to be that kind of glue to make some substantial influence in people's life, it does matter. How important do you perceive your work as being that of digital activism?
I actually don't like confrontation that much. Like, I prefer to talk with people. So this is why I prefer the term lobbyist in a way. Like, I define myself more as a lobbyist than an activist. But viewing myself as a digital activist, I guess you could, or digital lobbyist, whatever terminology we want to use. I'm sure we're meaning the same thing. Um, I guess I guess yes. I guess yes. Like, I would be dishonest if I didn't acknowledge this, especially with the sustainability agenda which is being implemented in Mauritius. Um, because I do ask CEOs if they take the bus to go to work. Uh,
You
I
do
can
that
talk
linger a
about,
lot. I saw you.
yeah, yeah, and I was very politely actually. Like, it's like, well, yeah, you. Because the thing with this, right? Because you mentioned this, I'm going to just take a case study, like,
Right.
of digital activism. Um, it's like the context in Mauritius for sustainability is that we have the government, we have the private sector, and we have the citizens, the civil society, right? It's always this tri-party relationship that exists in all, like, sort of like societies. Well, form societies, modern
Yeah.
societies, and like, so the government is always going to be there to legislate. The business is always going to be there to, like, sort of make profits, and the citizens or the civil society will sort of lobby both of them to, like, have their voices heard. So the sustainability agenda is like, being able to have all of those three stakeholder groups, the three main stakeholder groups, to actually sit together and actually develop solutions so that we can actually sustainably manage our resources that we have available, so that we have a good standard of living, not too much, not too little, enough for everyone, equitable. So standard of living, being able to live in a clean environment, and with the ecosystem that actually doesn't degrade too much of a time, like it actually gives space to regenerate, and where we can actually, like, live amongst different, like, societal levels, like, as harmoniously as possible. So the government's doing their thing, very good. We're getting a lot of sort of help, I guess you could say. Uh, yeah, lobbies from from overseas who come in here and, like, re-advising the government on what legislation to put in, etc., etc. But for the private sector, what I've noticed is that they're using the sustainability discourse and as a, well, as a
Shield.
branding tool, marketing tool, and this is where greenwashing, impact washing sort of comes in. And I've been noticing this for quite a while, because my profession, like what I do in my 9 to 5, is, you could say I'm a sustainability auditor, like, or assessor. So I actually, like, I don't work in Mauritius per se, but, like, for companies in Mauritius, but, like, general companies overseas. So it's the same sort of, like, systems which are being implemented in Mauritius, like due diligence systems, right? To
Right.
say that, okay, we do know that this exists, like an environmental risk exists, but this is what we're doing as a business to prevent this risk from happening. But the risk is always a risk, and there's always controversies which happen. But so for the get them to take the bus, what I was seeing is that, um, there was a lot of CEO sort of branding going on. There was, like, a couple of CEOs, executives, which was coming and saying that, yes, we are a very sustainable company. We do this. We care about our employees. We care about the earth. We care about our profits as well. But we care more about the environment and the social than our profits. And I was looking at that. I was like, dude, like, Yeah, it's very, yeah, okay, cool. But if you want to, so Business Mauritius actually says that they want to develop like a sustainable and inclusive Mauritius. Fair enough. And they actually released a charter for businesses to comply to. And one of the elements in the charters is like one initiative that they actually encourage the businesses globally locally in Mauritius to actually do is like one, it's just one, huh? There's a lot of other stuff, is to tell employees to have meat-free Mondays. And
Right.
everyone should
Okay.
have meat-free Mondays.
Okay.
Um, I was raised in a Hindu household. We have a lot of meat-free days during the whole year, right? When we have our fasting and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. It's like, okay, yeah, most a lot of like people who have different faiths actually fast a day a week for their faith. Not particularly a lot of like religious myself, but culturally, right? But the thing is, what it's like with climate change, sustainability, social justice, there's this concept of common but different differentiated responsibilities, right? So we have a common goal, but each of us have a differentiated responsibility to how to achieve this goal. If you're asking an employee to symbolically, there's of course like some quantitative explanation can be given as to reducing food waste, CO2 emissions, etc. But if you're asking employees to actually one day a week stop eating meat to contribute to a better climate, a better environment, protection, etc. If a CEO does that, yeah, it's very symbolic, but what would be more like impactful in terms of like actually marketing, guerrilla marketing, you could say, would be like if the CEO actually took the bus one day to go to work. That would be like the best thing a CEO could do, actually. Like if he actually had a whole month, he just took the bus to go to work. It's like reduces your carbon footprint, actually like it's very a lot about like social equity as well. You actually see the people you're going to work with. You don't ride a BMW to go to work, even if the BMW is electric. You're still very comfortable in the car.
Yeah.
And my view of it was that if you shift the discourse, if you actually get the very very privileged to actually use public transport again, this will really create sort of like this will bridge the empathy gap that oftentimes happen in like corporate structures where decisions are taken at a high level with people who live in like sort of an ivory tower, which is okay. Some of them have achieved like this through their own means. But if you're talking about sustainability, wanting to be an inclusive society, you should sort of walk the talk or take the bus because it would speak volume. And I even have a middle ground for that. Let's just say a CEO doesn't want to take the bus. He's like he's got some health issues, he has mobility issues, etc. Okay, so you do have a commute every day to go to work, right? Maybe identify some people who are like from a protected group who have disabilities, who actually can't a mother, who can't actually who will actually who can actually use a lift. Like you have, if you have you in your car driving, you have four more spaces. You could put in
Carpooling.
like some of your employees in there. And I do know for a fact that it was being done like in the 90s, right? 90s and the 80s. Like I know very successful like business people from this time, this older generation, who actually had this sort of spirit of collaboration and didn't have this sort of like very clear cut like no, we don't want to mingle with those people.
Right.
In a way it's very matter of it's roughly put, right?
Yeah.
But this was sort of my digital activism sort of aspect of thing. It was just me being clever. I did ask a couple of CEOs if they took the bus, never really got an answer.
Yeah, no, for sure. But like it definitely comes across as, like, oh, this is new. So as a consumer, calling a company out on Facebook or Instagram on like a normal C2C, B2C platform is kind of like something that you can even see in terms of, customers giving reviews. But to go ahead and call out a company or corporate culture on LinkedIn from almost a B2B capacity is something entirely different. And I'm sure so many people do it across the world in different countries. But for me as a Mauritian, to see a Mauritian doing that with Mauritian companies is like, wow, like, And that's what I want to ask you. Like, again, like there's so many points that you mentioned, and like there's like really interesting
Mm.
bits to it. Because let me just like kind of like scroll back a bit. With regard to CEOs, taking public transport, a probable thought to be extended to our dear parliamentarians.
I
Um,
have a yeah.
yeah. And also with regards to, like the 1980s carpooling, culture, it kind of strikes me in a very different way today, because when I think about the CEOs in various private companies in Mauritius, they're not necessarily locals today. It's almost like this cultural mixing that we're asking is not even about different classes who are Mauritian. It's mainly about different nationalities today, that we're probably asking here when we're having this conversation. And it just speaks so much about how the corporate world itself has changed in Mauritius, with brain drain, with the import of, more sophisticated management from different other countries to come and establish themselves in the top hierarchy of corporate culture. And it kind of like makes you wonder, like, are we having a national identity dissociation from a cultural perspective as well, even before we broach the more sustainable aspect of it?
Mm.
Um, but yeah, no, like just to bounce off
Yeah,
from
yeah,
everything that you
and
mentioned.
actually, I can actually like answer to you. To I think you raised 2 points. I do have a plan for. I do have a proposition for actually the
Okay,
parliamentarians.
tell us about it.
Like, I just thought I just want to put it out there. I didn't want to put it out there because
Okay, cool.
it's sort of. No, I say it to you like it's fine. Like I don't really. Yeah, but it's fine.
No, like
Uh,
if you feel
it's
comfortable, or
no
else,
no
like
no
I'm more than
no no
happy
no.
to read
It
about it
was
once
no
you
no.
share it with the world.
No. I actually started doing it, but it was just a joke because in Mauritius we do have some political repression sometimes,
Yeah,
but it's a little
for
bit.
sure.
But yeah, but uh, but yeah, for the parliamentarians, it's like what time you go to the parliament. You know how many people are going to go to the parliament. There's some taxi drivers and van drivers who don't have it, who are having trouble making both ends meet at the moment because of like low tourist arrivals and stuff. So there's some logistics to it, but the thing is, when I go to like say a company event, a corporate event, an end of year event, we know that we need to be in a place at this time. There's a
Right.
plan, a 15 seater which is going to come,
Yeah.
going to take
Yeah.
us from this place and bring us there, and then it's going to drop us off at our homes after, like our places after. So you can do that. You can actually do that, like, because it's constituencies, right? In Mauritius, like you have people living in different constituencies. You all know you have to get together at this place. It's very fixed times. You can actually do that, and there would be like security issues. Okay, let's say the prime minister is fair, like because the prime minister as the holder of the post needs to be sort of protected. So fair enough for the prime minister and from some senior ministers. But the rest of the parliamentarians, they can actually do it, and they can actually take the metro to go to the parliament and stuff. It would be beneficial for themselves, for their image. I don't really. It's like I don't know how they don't see it in a way, especially the more woke politicians. They
Right.
actually like if I ask them that, they'll be like, no 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 no. Why? I prefer not to talk about it. I had a conversation with one of them one day. And yeah, but that's just my for the parliamentarians. With regards to you touch on a point which I actually like. It's a pet peeve of mine. It's like one of my the thing about like expatriates who are coming to Mauritius, immigrants really, economic immigrants like who come into Mauritius and actually taking the whole like who are placing themselves in like the corporatocracy, so the corporate world in like certain key positions. I had a conversation once with like a very open French person, and she did say that Mauritius has been built on immigration, which is true.
Which is
Depends
true.
on if it's forced. Depends what you
Yeah.
mean immigration.
Colonization is
Like,
a form of
yeah,
immigration in
yeah,
ways. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I was like, but she didn't say it in a way which was let's just say it was a white privilege talking, okay, to talking
Yeah.
to the social justice
Yeah.
sort of lexicon.
Entire. Yeah.
And so I did play with the white fragility in a bit, and I was like, yeah, but the thing you don't realize is that when you come here with your novel ideas, with your very broad perspective of the world, like which is great. You come from like a developed country, you come in here, it's the paradise for you, right? You live in like a very privileged neighborhoods. Most of them live in smart cities. They live in gated neighborhoods. You live very privileged lives here, and so you don't really know how to handle the typical Mauritian who, unlike you and me, haven't hasn't had the privilege to actually be able to expand his horizon that much. So there's a big culture clash happening like in this sort of like in the corporate world with regards to this. And also the big thing is that um, it sort of imposes a form of cultural colonialism.
Oh,
uh,
yeah, for
yeah,
sure. You
and actually
couldn't
it
place
does
it
because
better.
yeah, because one thing which people don't realize as well is that a lot of executives, a lot of people in Mauritius who are like who are executives or managers or directors in like the companies in Mauritius, publicly listed companies, they actually have double nationalities as well. Like so they in French say binationaux, right? So we have a lot of strong cultural ties with France. And so it's like, yeah, but it sort of creates a dissonance where when we were in school, we learned in English medium. So when you go to work, you need to have perfect French to be able to send emails as well. You know, like the business language in Mauritius is French.
Yeah.
And we do get a lot of lobbying from like development agencies from the AFD, which is French. So you're like, yeah, cool. Like you're bringing a consultancy, etc., etc. You're doing a lot of things. You like bringing innovation and stuff, but it's sort of like restricting the opportunities for the Mauritians. And it's a conversation that needs to happen. I've been meaning to like have like someone who I can talk to, like an ambassador and stuff about those issues, because it's really like it's suffocating some people, and it's actually creating some sort of resentment in many people who don't understand, who can't grasp the things, the concept that identity is sort of fluid, it needs to evolve, but it needs time to do so. And yeah, and sort of touches on the aspect that now with the digital world, with the boundaries, like there's no boundaries in the digital space, but the physical boundaries, like where you are in in the physical space, is very much real. And sorry about that. And there's actually something which you could look into, because I'm actually like focusing a lot on like diversity, equity, and inclusion in the corporate world at the moment. And I'm doing a lot of research, reading like what some companies are doing, etc. Trying to piece out what Mauritius is doing as well. And yeah, you can sort of see this sort of like westernized countries, like through way of their business channels, they're imposing a sort of view of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which doesn't really fit with like our priorities
Oh,
in terms of
yes.
equity, diversity, and inclusion in Mauritius. Like I'll give you just an example of this. When you in accounting terms, you have you have a term which is used like profit center and cost
Yeah.
center,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not I'm not an accountant, but I'm sure I'm going to get fact checked. I'm really happy to get fact checked when it comes to this. But basically, Mauritius is considered as a cost center, right? Because we're supposedly not generating sales, not generating leads, etc., etc. We're just here to do the work. When let's say an English company, a French company, or European company comes and settle here, so we actually very cheap labor, and like they have to pay for rent, etc. So we're costing them money. But in those Western countries, they're a profit center because they bringing in the business to Mauritius, and it's like just this accounting term. It's like, well, we actually helping you guys, like thank you very much for bringing the business here, but could you not talk about us in terms of cost center? It's sort of like dehumanizing, like it's sort of not really what sustainability is about in a way.
Appreciating.
Yeah, it's like yeah, it's obfuscating. It's like uh, I'm sorry, like someone in Mauritius like is as valuable as someone overseas. And yeah, so this those are the um, things that the sustainability agenda needs to start changing. And this is especially relevant for in the contemporaneous context at the moment. I don't know where this is going to go out, but on the 31st of October 2021, in November, there's going to be the COP26, right? So
Yeah.
COP26 is about climate change, creating, actually addressing climate change. Let's put it like this. So the thing is, the whole thing was that for climate change, we need climate justice. And within climate justice, there's social justice as well, right? So it's like the Western countries, the big countries, big polluter countries, historically, they're saying, well, we need to clamp down on like a lot of our traditional development models and develop new ones, innovation, as they put it. And us in Mauritius and in southern countries, we're like, yeah, that's cool, that's great, but how will we do that? We don't have the funds to do it, so they're actually channeling some money to us as loans, grants as well, but mostly loans. So when you're loaning money to someone to actually implement some programs like having solar panels, having coastal like a protection against coastal like how do you call it? Erosion côtière, coastal like thing,
Erosion.
erosion. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So you actually like you're given a loan. So loans are attached most of the time to diplomatic like sort of
Ties.
yeah, exactly. Like, and it's like, okay, so what are we gonna do about those sorts of things? It's like they do have influence on like certain policy decisions, like, and especially in Mauritius, we have a for the policymakers, for the government side of things. And not only talk about businesses, private sector, but we do tend to copy and paste like what other countries have implemented at their place,
Templates.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And those templates come from like overseas consultants who's come here and like they tell people what to do.
They've got
So
zero idea of the local context whatsoever.
exactly, and this joins your point which you made previously, right? Like, and what started this whole rant of mine, sort of.
It's not a rant. Like, I swear, like, you were literally snatching the words from my mouth because, very honestly, it's something that I've been seeing for what the past 5 years. I'm just a fresh graduate from 2020. I've been to Mauritius during like my holidays, looking for internships here and there. And whenever I wanted to go and intern at a particular place, and I had to look for mentorship or advice, I couldn't see people who looked like me.
Mm,
How do I even bother having a discussion about Mauritian issues with somebody who didn't grow and wasn't born and brought up in the country?
mm. Yeah, and yeah, and the thing is, like, I actually have those conversations with because you know, like, I have some expatriate friends, like, I happily help them out if they have some things they need to work out. And the thing is, it's a fine line, like, because most of the time, this sort of like the word that comes to at the tip of someone's mouth when you mention those sort of issues is xenophobia, right? So you're just xenophobic. It's like no, it's I'm not phobic, and I'm not philic either, right? Because it's the both sides of the spectrum, right? It's either phobia or philia.
if
So
if I can just if I can just interject super quickly over here, I'm
yeah.
like, are you really going to call Mauritians xenophobic? Like, I'm pretty sure we've got our own share of, having not the best social relationships between communities, but it doesn't mean that over 50 years of independence hasn't taught us how not to be xenophobic. And I kind of like feel like it's really a blame game covering up for what some do not want to acknowledge.
Mm, mm,
There is a certain amount of supremacy that
mm,
comes with the Western gaze of the world.
yeah, 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 definitely. Yeah, it's a post-colonial world, right? It's like yeah, it's the post-colonial world. It's just a reality. Like, and when I talk to to some overseas people I work with, um, who are very liberal, who are very like into all of those social issues, environmental issues in back in the Western countries. When I mention like, I always let them talk. I'm like, because I'm actually educated on what's happening there. You know,
Yeah.
like I know what's going on in France, I know what's going on in Germany a little bit, I know what's going on in England a little bit, and America a lot because it's America. We all have to know what's going on there, right? So,
The
so,
internet. Dominating
so
it, so you need to know.
yeah, yeah. So I always listen, and then you just offer them this perspective that we sort of like trying to like put into words here, and it hits with this sort of like that's it. It's the empathy gap. It's like those values that those big aspirations that they have in those developed countries. If they actually lived by them fully, like not just being like virtue signaling wokesters, very caricatural, I know. But if they actually
Yeah.
applied it, it would mean that, well, they would actually have to radically shift their sort of like discourse in a way. It's like, and just the way they perceive the world. And it's just a very weird sort of conversation to have, but I
Yeah.
always try to sort of have them. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Go.
and
Sorry.
yeah. No, it's fine, it's fine. And the thing is, it's that's the whole root of sustainability, right? And that's the whole ethical aspect of it. Because the thing is, with sustainability, it's becoming sort of a marketing tool, a branding tool. That's
Greenwashing.
there's greenwashing and there's green wishing. Let's put it this way. So, and greenwashing is very much accusatory. Like it's very easy to, I know it. It's very easy to accuse someone of greenwashing because it becomes sort of an ideology at the end of the day. So, green wishing in a way, it's sort of like companies, products and stuff acknowledging that do have an impact and how they're going to reduce this impact in a very sort of forward-looking way. So there's those two sides of the spectrum going on, but and because we're in a world in transition, right? There's going to be like fender benders along the way. Like we definitely can't avoid this, but it's good to have this honest conversation about it. Like I actually called out a couple of instances of greenwashing because I actually viewed it as a bit too much. Like if you're doing influencer marketing and you're saying that you're green, ecological influencer, I'm like, dude, uh, what do you do? Like you go and shop for like secondhand clothes. You live
Circular
in like a
economy.
very yeah
Stainless
it
steel straw. No
yeah
plastic.
yeah it's very good that all of this is going on and like being eco-friendly, sort of the eco-friendly bourgeoisie. It's just to give yourself a good conscience and what we really need would be like for those people from my generation, your generation, to actually like who are really involved and they actually believe in all their heart that they're doing a good thing, which is great. That you have very booming businesses, etc., and those things, circular economy, and like helping community development and stuff. The biggest conversation you could have for those like sort of ecologist bourgeois would be to actually sit with your with with the oligarchy from which you form part of, and actually
Yeah.
have very tough conversations with them. Say, okay, so why is our community m- very few in numbers, but we have a lot of the capital? You know, those are questions that needs to be to be talked about, especially in a post-colonial island where you're trying to implement sustainability and inclusiveness in your economic policies.
For
And
sure. And like sorry, but like in your
no,
opinion, with regards to, like you sort of having a platform to talk to these people, what's the response like? Because obviously you shared how, one person that who's open minded, and they had this whole discourse where all of us are immigrants anyway in Mauritius.
yeah,
And like obviously like I as somebody who is brown, as someone who came through my entire ancestor profile is from indentured laborer, which is another extension of replacing colonial rule in terms of slavery. I kind of think that that comment does come from a certain privileged background. But um, do you feel that there is an openness to having those tough conversations, or is that openness just as a show?
It depends on the people, actually. It actually depends on the individuals. The collective is always inert in a way, but if you have enough individuals who want to change something, the change does happen. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. So I would say that I've talked to a couple of people, and especially on my memes, etc. Like, unfortunately, due to Mauritius becoming sort of metropolis, like of the Indian Ocean, very bad at it. But anyways, you don't have a lot of time to talk to people like face to face. But there's some openness to discuss about certain issues. And just to be clear, I'm not only talking about white people, right? Not the
Okay.
descendants of French people, also
Okay.
about certain brown people as well who do have a lot of privilege, like historically throughout the very smart decisions, I guess you could say, about his ancestors, and mixed as well.
Okay.
The whole privilege class. So it's there's some openness to discuss, but there's no real commitment. Well, there's no real commitment, right? Like
Action.
it's yeah, actions,
Love.
because look, I won't necessarily blame them for it, those individuals. Some of them, because at at some point, like, do you want people to sort of whip themselves? Like, is it really the solution to actually be coming here and just accusing people, placing yourself in the place of the victim? Maybe it's my male privilege talking here, but I can't. I don't think that's a proper way to approach it. Like, the way I approach it, me, is through wittiness and humor, right? Making some people realize that they have certain privileges, they need to check those privileges and try to actually let go of some of them, and because eventually it's gonna happen. Cause and I speak from sort of experience, because I never thought I would fall on the social ladder. But with economic downturns, which happen every so often with our neoliberal sort of system, it does sort of happen. Empires crumble, and it's like people need to be aware of that, especially since the big thing at the moment is that sustainability, it was very wishy-washy, hippie sort of vibe at one point. Let's say from 2015, from the moment it was incepted in the early 1990s,
Yeah.
up until 2015, it was very wishy-washy. It was like, yes, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna do that. We're a very haphazard plan.
Yeah.
Then 2015, 2016, they developed the Sustainable Development Goals, and so it became like sort of very structured thing. There's lots of goals, but 17 of them in total, and but it actually provides sort of the paint palette, so you can
Yeah.
paint the canvas, right? And so now it's a little bit more structured. So the thing is how it's impacting now, because most of those, let's say, trust fund babies, in a way, and trust fund holders as well. So all the people who hold the wealth in the world, or in Mauritius, now there's a new aspect which is coming, which is called green finance, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you've heard of it. So green finance, the big thing with that, it's introducing a concept called environmental social governance criteria. So ESG. Okay. So
Yeah.
those three criteria are actually now used to value financial products. Now, once you integrate those into a sort of financial speculation, or actually how a company performs, if it's actually doing a good job of giving back to the community, giving back to the environment, protecting and stuff, you're actually putting figures on those performance, like environmental and social. This is where the advocacy and the lobbying aspect of things come in. This is where people can actually place decision makers, or the kids who actually become sort of in the business sometimes. I don't know how. Our competence as well most of the time. But actually
It's
place them, yeah, yeah.
it's how
Actually place them
things
in front
work
of,
from time to time.
yeah, and actually place them in front of like the actual reality of their social initiatives within your company and outside of your company, and also your environmental impact in your company and outside of your company. So this is what I do actually in my spare time. Sort of boring that way. It's actually,
Research.
yeah, yeah. I guess you share this common trait, is that I actually research a lot of sustainability reports locally, and actually like have my own database and stuff. I'm planning to write a book about it eventually, and
Wow.
like just so just like to be able to get rid of all this like sort of greenwashing, as you say, green wishing, and actually looking at it in a sort of like very like sort of I wouldn't say impartial, but like in a new way, in a new perspective, like sort of like more not the marketing side of things, but the ethical side of things, right?
Right.
So because right now you do know that there's ethos, pathos, and logos, right?
Logos. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's the way you talk, right? Discourses. So right now, most of the discourse on like sustainability, which we get in the press, in marketing messages, PR messages, is very much focused on like the pathos and the logos. So it's logical to do it, and we feel good about doing it.
Yeah.
But there's no real discussion going on about the ethos side of thing, the ethical aspects of thing. And this comes back to like our conversation, which you just had about like really equity. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you come into a new country, establishing yourself in a new country, having a good job, etc., being paid minimum 60,000 rupees if you have the proper permits and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this places you like in the 3% top earners, 4% top earners, definitely top 5% top earners of the country.
Yeah.
To actually realize that, yeah, you're very privileged, right? And to actually make you realize that it's like it's things to consider, especially when you're trying to impose your certain view on things.
Yeah, like
And
even like in terms of policy making and the kind of decisions you want to make from a corporate sustainable level.
mm,
For sure. And I really should thank you over here because like now I feel really silly with my set of questions because like
I am.
um no, I tell you why. Cause and this is entirely my ignorance. Like
Uh,
I've never been extremely involved in anything that has to do with eco consciousness or eco friendliness. And this is definitely like my sheer ignorance. And I can't apologize enough for probably not seeking out more. I've kind of like been a bit more passionate about other things. But now that you also mentioned and introduced this idea to me that climate justice um, is intrinsically linked with social justice
mm,
and how they are at the intersection of each other. And that's an absolutely new view to me. And
mm,
in a lot of ways, as someone who probably has a passion more towards the social aspect of things, this kind of like starts like really igniting my interest, and like this feels really basterish for me to say it this way. But it almost makes me feel like wow, like what if every because obviously climate is something that everybody should be involved in and should be part of, and it sort of is starting to make me question like what if everybody had a part of their passion, and I'm sure it is that way, linked with what's happening in our ecology, in our climate processes, in terms of what we can do to militate towards, our habits, the kind of little things that we can do to contribute more consciously. So I really should thank you for bringing this to my attention. Like this has been a phenomenal learning process. Just understanding this perspective. So honestly, like, thank you so much.
yeah, no, like yeah, because your questions were perfectly fine. Like when we talked previously, like and stuff about how we're gonna have this conversation, like it's perfectly fine. Like, because it's a very specific topic which touches on like which really brings out this emotional reaction in most of us, right? Because it's our survival as a species, and it's how we individually contribute to this. And yeah, no, no. Just to answer one of the things we wanted to approach. I'm actually like one of the things, two things I can say to people who actually want to have an individual like sort of action to maybe contribute in their own way to having sort of a less of a carbon footprint or material footprint, ecological footprint. Be one thing, turn off the 3G on your phone or your Wi-Fi on your phone. Um, it may seem like a little thing, but it's just that this sort of if you always leave the 5G on your phone, it consumes energy, right? Like we all know how if you leave like your mobile data on, it's gonna consume energy. Like you're gonna have to
Yeah,
charge your phone more.
yeah.
And it's not necessarily good for your mental health either because you're always gonna get notifications and stuff. So especially if you're on Twitter, like it always finds you and those notifications. Like that's what's bad about the platform, I guess. Well, not bad, but like insidious. And so that's one thing. Like turn off the mobile data. It does contribute to like sort of reduce your carbon footprint, and it helps with your mental health as well. So it keeps you more focused on what's around you.
Thanks so
Um,
much for sharing that.
yeah, and there's another thing as well which I personally do is like is choose one product like or two or three products which has palm oil in it, which is sourced from child labor, um, and which has bad agricultural practices up to it, and just don't quit it, like but try to limit your use of this because the small individual choices they do add up. Different school of thoughts with regards to this, but it's just like to empower people to actually start to emancipate themselves in a way. Is that so? Just quitting it does send sort of a market signal to policymakers, to like markets to stop producing those products or produce it more responsibly. Customer demand and customer perception is really important. What I do is I don't eat chocolate. So,
Yeah,
yeah, because there's lots of child labor in chocolate, and it's like sort of a sacrificial thing for me. I do eat it sometimes, but very rarely, very very rarely. And it's just like this small shift in like the way you consume. You realize how much chocolate there's around you, and how many kids were most likely involved into farming those in very bad conditions, farming those cocoa beans. And so yeah, those are two small advices I would give to people. And just before we close as well, you did ask if I could mention some people who I think are doing a good work, good job. I can be very critical, but it's my, so let's say, my auditor's perspective. It's my job conditioning, right? It's my déformation professionnelle. I can be very critical of something, but also realize the good aspects. Um, so there would be like Foodwise, which is doing a good job. Like they're actually doing like a very good job of like redistributing like food waste and stuff to constituents who need it, like NGO recipients who need it. Sorry, my mom herself, she has an NGO and she is a recipient. So I can see that it does really help in alleviating the food poverty that exists in Mauritius, unfortunately. And they actually have like they're actually starting to develop this whole food waste system. It was a boost in the sort of circular economy sort of thing, but they're actually educating people who put at the source as well to reduce producing that much food waste. So Foodwise is doing a good job. You also have Dynamia. So they are a company who actually just got certified to B Corp certification. It's a sustainability management certification. So they're the first company in Mauritius to do that, to achieve this certification. So kudos to them. It's a tough process. And who else? Who else? There was the Dakri Cottons, who were actually one of the first to actually think about recycling cottons in Mauritius. Unfortunately, back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there wasn't that much like legislative like framing to it, and it didn't happen from what I know. But they did like try to push this to happen, and they do like focusing more on sustainable packaging now. And yeah, so those are three sort of like positive impacts that needs to be considered because we tend to like focus on the negative most of the time, and this is true for me as well. I do have a negative bias some of the time. So those three sort of like organizations, they're doing a good job. In terms of individuals, like I would say that Shama Sandoya, I guess everyone who's in our sort of like circle, I guess
Circle.
she's yeah. So she's a biologist, I guess you could say, a marine biologist. She was the first one to actually strike underwater strike.
Underwater.
Unfortunately, some people in power didn't know this when they were interviewed on French TV, but that's okay. And so yeah, she's
Oh
doing a
yeah, I
good job
remember what you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah.
cool.
So she's actually I've become friends with her in a way, like because we did meet on like a forum like one time when I was talking about climate change bill. The first time I met her, I heard about her work, of course, and she's very down to earth. She's a very good scientist. She has a very good scientific focus, so really good work on that. Jamila as well, like she's fighting a lot for period poverty, which is for gender equality, women's emancipation. It is like I joke about it sometimes, but it's not to be taken like too hard. It's just like to be able to banter with people because we still need to be able to joke with people. But she is doing like a very very good job with period poverty, like distributing like well tampons, etc., etc. So yes, so that's very good on her part, and I would give a very kudos to Business Mauritius as well. I am very critical of them. Uh, Critiquer, ce n'est pas détester.
No.
If you get what I mean, because
Pas
their
du
lobby,
tout.
yeah, their lobby group of very intelligent people. They do have the corporatist side of things, neoliberal side of things attached to them, but they do really good work in the field of sustainability. The thing is, like, how is it's applied? That's a different sort of. It's a different story, but I did notice a lot of very positive signals recently with regards to this, and this will cascade down with other businesses within the corporatocracy in Mauritius. And I could actually go on, but I think like we're sort of like already way over time. It's getting
Oh no,
close to
that's all
five
good.
minutes.
Don't worry. Like I'm just
Yeah.
like I hope you need to have some water. Like I don't know. Like I'm just like trying to let you catch your breath.
Mm,
um, but no, that's
yeah.
all good. Don't worry about it. I guess in case you just want to wrap up because I don't want to take too much of your time as well. It's probably dinner time already at yours.
Yeah.
Um, if that's like the one question as well. Like if you had to write an open letter to the Ministry of Education, like not education but environment, um, what would be like that one like three things that you would absolutely hand on your heart
Mm.
recommend?
Oh, the first thing would be like to seeing that we actually have a lot of French influence at the moment. We could actually take a page off the French because they did introduce a piece of legislation in the whole loi climat, so climate laws, about greenwashing. So we could do that in Mauritius, like just ask the ambassadors, etc., how they did it, and they are pretty much sure they'll share it with you. And so that's one thing. The second thing would be to how do you say it? To actually be more coherent in like being able to address issues frontally when they happen, because there was there's this dissonance in a way, and this is where the accusations of greenwashing most of the time come. It's like seeing that in the system of transition is there's there's going to be like a controversy, and then there's going to be like a good action. It's knowing how to manage this sort of like this sort of well, I don't know what you call it, this controversy, the controversy ball, I guess. In the newspaper this weekend, I read on Saturday that there was like a big problem in like Belmore and stuff, if I recall correctly, right? It was a big thing, like about like coastal erosion and stuff because of projects, etc., that getting EIAs and stuff. I think, like I'm talking from memory. And then 2 pages later, they were like, "Yeah, we're advertising for integrated ecological capital management and stuff." So it's like there's this dissonance which is going to be created, and it's exactly what the first one is going to be able to mitigate is to have a law which prevents greenwashing.
Right.
So those two things. So just learn to be able to communicate better, like be better advised, like because he's a very learned man. He actually knows how to talk. He's a good orator, but he doesn't have the he's not well advised on how to approach certain issues.
And who are we
So
talking about again? I'm sorry, I don't think I caught
sorry,
that.
sorry.
Who are we talking about? I'm not sure I caught that right.
Yeah, the Minister of Environment.
Gotcha,
Yeah,
gotcha.
Kavi Ramano. Yeah. So it would just be the first one would be like to introduce the greenwashing legislation, like anti-greenwashing legislation. The second point would be like to actually be more coherent in his action in his speeches and be able to address controversies head on, not actually wait for them to open up and blow up, and actually explain things in a very pedagogical façon pédagogique. So
Yeah,
that's the 2 points. The third one would be like take the bus to go to the parliament.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, like
They-
so good. No, honestly, like freaking good. Like you, so my dad, he's very much of that, a little bit of an idealistic man himself. And he would always like come up with like these points where, no, like they should do it. Like, why not? And like, I generally appreciate that. And like, just to see a bit of that reasoning in the same line, which like, it may sound silly, but substantially, it compounds, it
Mhm.
contributes to the larger terms of things. So, yeah, no, for sure.
Because
Um,
the prime minister of New Zealand is a good example of this. Like, because I'll give her the the credit of being she can be performative as much as she wants because she's actually delivering in a way. You know, like it's a careful balancing act for politicians. I guess we had the conversation in regards to this like on one of my posts, but
yeah,
so yeah, it's a careful balancing act, and you need to be able to walk the talk. Talk,
yeah,
of course, but
for
walk.
sure.
Try to try to walk as fast as you talk.
Yeah, no, that's a very good way of putting it, because I don't think everything has a pro and con. Like if you just focus on somebody being performative and not focusing on the actions they're actually taking, but at the same time, yes, the action should match what's being performed. So
Mm.
absolutely. Ishan, any last words, any last thoughts that you'd like to kind of like end with?
Well, I would just say thanks to you for like hosting me today. It was a very nice conversation. I really appreciated it. Like, thank you for that. I would also use this opportunity to say that if someone who just graduated needs uh, to get in the corporate world, I may have an opportunity for them. So don't hesitate to get in touch. Like I can try to with my contacts and stuff. I can try to help them out in this in whatever way I can. So definitely, and um, and yeah, if there's anything which triggered people in this conversation, I'm always free to discuss. Like so that's I guess the main takeaway I want to for people to have if they watch this whole conversation is that we're living in a world of transition. We're transitioning in our social values, our social ethos, our view of the world. So tough conversations are going to need to happen, and tough conversation doesn't mean that we can't live with each other. Like this binary view of the world is very toxic, and we just need to be able to understand that algorithms don't dictate how we live our lives. Like we're not in transhumanism just yet. We actually very much like in a very weird place where we need to reduce our uh, traditional view of what's achievable and being able to balance it with like our natural and social capital. And like you said previously, the keyword is resilience. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Ishan, first for being so gracious with your time, efforts, and also for being um, supportive of your own thoughts, because that's something that we often forget to do. And you're one of the few persons that I've come across online who actually walks the talk in a way of speaking, just like you kind of like borrow the words from yourself.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, thank you so much for that. And I just want to say that I've had a couple of recordings, and I think that this is the one recording where I feel like come into it and gone out of it taking more than what I came into it with. Um,
Okay.
so
Yeah,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much. Definitely. I feel that there's so much work for me personally to do at a very my own environmental consciousness level to figure out more. To add to your point of, amazing people doing work and the kind of like little tips as to, like switch off the Wi-Fi, or what can you like do to kind of like adopt a better lifestyle. I also like recommend that everybody just sort of starts following um, climate change pages on Instagram. Follow the right pages, follow the kind of pages that are defying bias in language, that are defying the kind of inclusivity that has been lacking in the past. So yes, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. I'm excited for people to hear this conversation. Yeah. Well, I guess like have a good time and good dinner. I would want to read that book that you write.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think we need more Mauritian literature and like academic writings when it comes to green consciousness.
Mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, I'll get right on it after this then. See you, see you guys.
Thank you
Really
so
nice
much.
conversation.